Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk, here in the southeast of Scotland. And of course, everybody knows that Scotland is the boss of everything, pretty much. Except for God. God is boss of Scotland, and then Scotland is boss of everything else. Anyway. Eventually I'm going to have to bring that joke to an end because it's pretty much run its course, I think. But anyway, I hope everybody has had a great start to their week. We are rapidly approaching the end of March, which means we are rapidly approaching the end of the first quarter of 2024. It is going by ludicrously fast this year. It's mental. But anyway, so we are fast approaching Easter, and so therefore we are also fast approaching the end of the Easter Songwriting Challenge. Now, there is no prize for this particular challenge. This one is much more about bragging rights and much more about just getting your music out there. We've had one entry so far, so at the moment, as it stands, that one entrant is going to be the de facto winner. And they will get their entry played on the show for Sunday Night Live on Easter Sunday. So if you want to be involved, you've not got long left. Okay, you've got a matter of a couple of weeks left to get involved. So what is the challenge? The challenge is to write a song that is between 90 seconds and 3 minutes long, preferably at the short end, 90 seconds, because, if we have a lot of entrants, I want to keep it kind of short and sweet with each song. But what you have to do, it doesn't matter what genre you write it in. You can write it in your favorite style, your favorite genre with your favorite chord changes, your favorite melodies, your favorite instrumentation. All of that is up for grabs. You can do whatever you like. However, you've got to write the song about an Easter egg. And here's the kicker. You've got to write it from the perspective of the Easter egg. So come up with a story, come up with a narrative. What happens to our hero Easter egg? But you've got to tell it from that Easter egg's point of view. So it could be sad, it could be devastating, or it could be joy-filled and happy, or it could be funny. Whatever you want to do is whatever you want to do. It's up to you. But if you want to submit an entry, what you need to do is you need to mix down your song to MP3, and then you need to go to the website address at the bottom of the screen here, and then hit the contact form, attach it to the contact form. All right, when you send me your email, then attach it to that email. Okay, and you want to put the subject line as the Easter Songwriting Challenge 2024, your entry. And then once I've got these MP3s together, I will put them into a playlist, and then I will play them on the show, and it will be pretty cool. I'm looking forward to hearing everybody's entries. And the winner will be chosen by basically the song that tells the best story and has a really memorable hook, memorable melody line, especially in that chorus. Something that really grabs our attention and makes us really, emotionally connect with the story and emotionally connect with the character of the Easter egg in your song. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for Easter egg song. It's got to be from the perspective of the Easter egg. So from the Easter egg's point of view, you can come up with whatever narrative you want. But the thing is, it's got to, in order for it to win, it's got to grab our attention, and it's got to really grab our emotional involvement, and get us to care about this character that you create. You can do that within 90 seconds, you'll have a winning entry. Most likely, quite possibly. Okay? So if you want to win, that's kind of the cheat sheet to it. Okay. So with that out of the way, let's go see who is here. And Boris, well done, Boris. You were first in the door. Congratulations. Followed by Stephen Wilson and Sean Aaron, Ron Figura, Tony Cordona. I'm not reading. I don't know why. I'm just scanning down the list and I just kind of butchered your name. Sorry, Tony. And Mike, he says, am I asleep? No, Mike, you're not asleep. You're kind of in that kind of period between being awake and being asleep. So this is kind of like a weird, that weird fantasy area. Just Bob dropped in and said, have a great show. Sorry, I'm going to miss tonight's show. We'll watch the replay. Thank you, Bob. And Bob actually sent me a question via Facebook Messenger, which we will get to as well. Rich Cresswell is here. Billy Morgan is here. DJ Vu is here. Carl Trajuziak is here. Don Oliver. Bobby Booth is here, which means we can actually start now. Dwayne is here. Daryl Harrison is also here. Paul Mint. Hello, Paul. Good to see you. Welcome. Let's see. John Hathaway is here. And he goes, lucky I remembered it's an hour early. Yes. We in the UK and in Europe are the only ones that move twice a year. We go, for springing forward and also going back. So in the spring and in the fall, basically we move back an hour. So we're an hour early in March and in November, and then we go back to normal. But other than that, it's always the same. Excuse me. John Hawk is here as well. And Harley Bob is here. Aurora's Boring Alice is here, who says pleasantries to all. Great, I'm glad you're here. DJ Vu has a question. What chord progression comes to mind in connection with spring? That's a good one. To when and to where to send MP3 for the challenge? See the web address at the bottom there? JonnyLipshamStudios.co.uk. Go to that web address, hit the contact form. In that contact form, subject line needs to be what I say it was Easter Songwriting Challenge 2024, and then attach your MP3 to that email. Sean Aaron has done it already. He is entry number 1, so I'd like some more. It'd be cool. So yeah, there we go. And Aurora's being puntastic, of course. I would not expect anything less of you, to be honest. I expect you to be puntastic. Hey, it's okay. Being puntastic is actually a good thing. I try and get at least 2 puns in per day. Let's see. Bobby Booth says, won't me doing this contest. Not that good at it. Bobby, that's okay. If you don't want to do it, it's fine. But you know what? You stepped up in the last couple of challenges and you did good. So I have confidence that you can do it, that you can do it well. All right, so let's get to these questions. And I'm going to start with DJ's question first. And then I'll get to Bob's question that he sent me via Messenger, because his one's a wee bit more involved. And he says, what chord progression comes to mind in connection with spring? It's a good one. Good question. Well, if you want to get a good idea of what music for different seasons might sound like, I can recommend Vivaldi's Four Seasons. It's a 4-movement work that he wrote during the peak of what we would now call the Baroque period. And it features solo violin amongst other featured instruments, and it's a fantastic work because it is very ahead of its time. He basically foresees a compositional style that would not come into being until the 20th century, and that is the tone poem. What's a tone poem? A tone poem is where you use music to basically describe an image. And so, you find a lot of impressionist composers from the 20th century, the late 19th and early 20th. Hang on, something has just fallen over under my desk. I'm just trying to fix that. Hang on. There we go, fixed. So yes, Vivaldi basically foretold or foresaw this particular compositional idea called tone poem, which is basically using music to convey a mood or an image. And so that's what essentially, in a single sentence, what a tone poem is. And that's essentially what the Four Seasons is. He uses the mood and the timbre and the texture of the orchestral instruments available to him, particularly strings, available to him, at his time, in his time. That thing's going to fall over again. I can feel it right now. Hang on, let me just move it. There we go. Moved it. It's fine. And so that's kind of what he did. He foresaw this style coming into being 400 years in the future. And so it is very well worth checking out, because you can certainly, particularly if you listen to spring or if you listen to winter in the Four Seasons, it really does evoke what the season might sound like. It's very, very, very cool. And of course, there are other modern works, like Le Sacre du Printemps as well, which I think that was Stravinsky who did that. Sacre du Printemps. I think that was Stravinsky. I've got a pretty good feeling it's Stravinsky. And that's kind of definitely in the realm of 20th century music. So yes, Four Seasons is a great example. Sacre du Printemps is another good one as well, for basically using music to describe and to give kind of like that vibe, that sound of what a particular season would sound like. So that's getting into the vibe and the mood and the sound of what a season might sound like. Now, how do we get there from like a chord changes point of view? Well, for me, winter is kind of a little bit bleak and it's a little bit dark. Which is why, the Christmas song In the Bleak Midwinter is so good, because it really captures the bleakness and the darkness of winter when, the sun goes down in Northern Hemisphere, goes down very early, like in the middle of the afternoon. The sun is starting to set and the nights are very long and very cold and very drawn out in the winter. And so In the Bleak Midwinter really does capture that vibe with its chord changes. It is in a major key, but it has passing key changes into the minor frequently, which gives you that sense of bleakness. It's very, very cleverly written. So that's a really good example to get your ears into. Rite of Spring was Stravinsky. Yes, it was. Thank you, John. Yes. Rite of Spring is, let's just say, it's incredibly complex. I played it in an orchestra when I was a teenager, playing timpani, and I tell you, by the time I got off the stage having played it, I was just like, man, I never want to play timpani ever again. And I did play timpani a few times later on a few different pieces in orchestra. But yeah, Rite of Spring, the timpani parts are horrendous. They are so challenging, so complicated. But not quite as complicated as some of the timpani part in Holst's Mars and Jupiter as well, from the Planets suite. My gosh, those are tough timpani parts for sure. So yeah, so if winter is kind of dark and kind of bleak, then spring to me is kind of emerging from that darkness, and the nights start to get shorter and the days start to get longer. You get sunrise that considerable bit earlier, and sunset starts to stretch out. Like tonight, for example, I was walking to the bus stop with my daughter at 6 o'clock in the evening, and it was still bright. It was still good quality light. Just a month ago, it would have been completely pitch black out there. But tonight it wasn't. The sun had not yet set. So, for me, how do we get to that musically? Well, to me, you can start to move up the keyboard a little bit. So I tend to think of kind of winter, even if I'm using major chords, I tend to think of quite a low tessitura. So something like that to me would be winter if I was using a major key. I could be quite dark, and I could maybe get that melancholy that you get by going from chord 1 to chord 4 minor. And some flat nines as well. And there I just landed on C minor because I liked to end dark because it's kind of winter. Now, if I'm moving towards spring, then I'm starting to move up the keyboard a little bit, from a little bit of a darker mood and into something a bit brighter, even if I'm staying within that kind of major mode. So, I might do something like this. Something like that, to me, that kind of suggests spring to me, kind of moving up stepwise, moving further up the keyboard and starting to open up, some upper mid sounds. So maybe not quite so dark, cellos, violins and second violins low down and clarinets low down in their lower register. Now we're starting to open up more into, upper strings, upper violins, and we're starting to get some flutes and piccolos popping through, and maybe some oboes start to play in a cor anglais, maybe. And maybe we start to get some French horns beginning to, to me, those are kind of sounds that make me think of spring, because those kind of orchestrations, those kind of instruments that I've just talked about, upper instruments, so flutes and piccolos and oboes. Oboes are great because they're a reed instrument, but they're a double reed instrument, so you get kind of, you know, that kind of raspiness that you get from reed instruments, but it's nice and sweet sounding, and it goes beautifully with flutes and piccolos and that kind of thing. And so, you know, you start to get the idea that, you know, you're starting to see flowers starting to blossom, and you know, trees are starting to begin to bud and bear new shoots and stuff like that. So everything's just that little bit happier. You might have a bit more of a smile on your face. So you can start to paint that in music with different tone colors than what you might do for winter, where it's dark, it's cold, there's not a whole lot of sunlight, so you're not getting a whole lot of vitamin D, so you may be feeling a little bit morose. You can describe that in music as well. That's a great question. Tony says, how about if you demo what you would write if you're entering this contest? I am actually entering this contest. I have actually started on it, so I'm not going to preview it because of that. DJ says, I think a good example of music in spring is Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles. Yeah, that's a very, very good example. It's very evocative, actually. One of the things they particularly paid attention to in that song is word painting. So the lyrics talk about, you know, upbeat things, and so you start to hear those kind of things being supported in the music. So, you know, Here Comes the Sun, everything's bright, everything's happy, and, you know, you've got nice, crisp, clear guitar tones and piano and stuff like that. Tony says, I guess it might be sad. Hang on, a notification's just popped up over what Tony said. If the Easter egg is going to end up in a kid's stomach. Well, you could write it from that point of view if you want to. If you want to talk about this, you know, this initial interaction, maybe your Easter egg is deluded and thinks, oh, great, I'm going to get to hang out with this great kid. Until the realization sets in the egg's mind that actually the kid is going to devour the Easter egg. It's not going to end well for the Easter egg. So maybe, you know, the Easter egg believes the marketing hype that, you know, sales and marketing do at department stores for their Easter eggs. And maybe the egg believes that stuff. And then, so it's expecting to have lots of fun with this kid. It's not going to work out that way. That delusion's going to fall away pretty quickly. So you could write about that if you wanted to, Tony. All right, let's get to Bob's question, which is just a wee bit more involved and a little bit more technical. He says, from a guitarist's point of view, instead of just playing chords like D, C, G, and E, for example, how to dress up the rhythm with little runs and extra notes between chord changes to keep it interesting. How to best do that without losing timing or feel. It can be expressed easily with the keyboard as you're not a guitar player. Yes, I'm not really a guitar player. Think this could help people with whatever instrument they play. Hope this makes sense. Yes. Okay, Bob, this is for you because you're watching on... you're not watching on the replay. You are watching on the replay because you're not here. You're watching on the replay. So, how can we spice up our chords even if we're not playing spicy notes? Because not all of you are capable of playing, you know, spicy notes like sharp 9s, flat 9s, 13, sharp 11 chords, stuff like that. That's kind of outside of your wheelhouse for a lot of you as guitar players. Some of you will be able to, bonus to you. But those of you that don't, how are you going to be able to dress up those chords? Fortunately, they're passing notes. Just as we talked about when we were talking about melody writing, we were talking about passing notes. You can do the same in rhythm guitar. Okay, it's not just all about finding a strumming pattern and then just going or whatever it is, whatever chord it is that you're playing. You can do something far more interesting. So, a lot of folk guitar players, and I know I sound like I'm picking on folk guitar players, but a lot of them will do things like they will hammer a note in the chord. So maybe they're playing a D chord, and if they take one finger off of one of the strings, it adds the second to the chord, and then they can just hammer that F sharp back in, and so they can hammer it off and hammer it back on, and that is a decoration it's a passing note. It is also a grace note. So you're fulfilling a lot of great music composing and arranging concepts by applying this, and it is so easy to do. So what am I talking about? I'm no guitar player, so I'm going to do it on the keyboard and show you kind of what I mean. So, ow, that hurt. Banged my knee, and I'm getting tangled up in cables. Hang on. So, that was not very smooth. So what am I talking about? Well, here's a D major chord. So if you turn that F sharp into an E, you get a D2 chord, right? There's no third. We've exchanged the third for the second degree of the scale. So you can do this. You can also do this. You can add in the sus4 as a passing note, not to play a sus4 chord, but to just add it as a passing note. So you could do and already you've got yourself a nice little riff that you can play that's not a straight. Eventually you'll lose interest in that. So let's make it a little more interesting. So and then when you change to the G chord, maybe, you know, so you can do those kind of things, you know, those little, you know, seconds to thirds, second to thirds, sus4. So you can do those kind of things that will spice up just a straight D chord to make it a little bit more interesting. You can also do a little run up as well. You know, you can go. Whatever you want to do, however busy you want your guitar part to be. If busyness is not what you're wanting to go for, you're wanting to go for something that's a bit less busy, then, you know, instead of making that really syncopated, make it a little bit more straight. Okay, so there's different things you can do there. Now, I threw in some extra chords that are completely not related, but made them work, like this F over B flat to E flat over A flat to the A7 and back to the D. You know, those are not related chords. Those are just the kind of chords that I like to use from time to time. But so those are some of the things you can do if you're a guitar player, is do little hammer-ons like that to kind of spice it up. And then, you know, little passing notes to the sus4 like that. And little things like this. So there's lots of kind of stuff you can do there. Passing chords, passing notes, they all make the difference. You know, you can, if you're playing funk on a guitar, you can slide. So you can start a fret below the chord you want and then just slide up to it, which is also very effective. So you're just basically turning that into not really technically a chord, it's more like a grace note. You can't really do that well on a keyboard. I mean, there are some keys where it's a bit easier. Like if I was to do an E minor, for example. I mean, that kind of thing that I was doing just there is definitely a James Brown kind of guitar riff, you know. If you do that, like, you could do that on the dominant chord, you know. It's not quite so easy on the dominant chord. It's easier on the minor on a keyboard, but on a guitar, you could do that with the dominant chord, you know. How would I do it on a... Not so easy to fake on a keyboard. Much easier to do on a guitar than a keyboard. And actually, this might sound pretty good on a Fender Rhodes, actually. So, you know, on the Fender Rhodes, it sounds probably a little bit funkier. So something like that would definitely work for what you want to do, to make your chords sound a little bit more interesting. So I hope that helps. That's a really, really great question, actually, Bob. You know, how can we make rhythm guitar parts more interesting, or just, you know, rhythm parts, whether it's a keyboard part or a guitar part, more interesting? And certainly sliding a chord would definitely work. Adding the 13th to a chord as a passing tone, you know, going back to the 7th, you know. Okay, so that definitely works. So, and you can do that actually pretty easy on a guitar. It does work on a keyboard, but it's definitely a lot easier on a guitar to do. And you'd certainly hear that in something like, you know, James Brown's Sex Machine is a really great example. Listen to that rhythm guitar part. It's not doing a lot. There's a lot of space in the main groove for Sex Machine. A lot of it comes from the very repetitive bass line. which is a great bass line to play because you can just lock in deep with the drums for that. And then the guitar is just basically going. That's all the guitar player is doing. And then the piano player doesn't really come in until halfway through the song. You've not heard the piano until it comes in halfway through the song, and it plays this counter melody, which is glorious. So yeah, stuff like that you can definitely do to make your guitar parts sound a little bit more interesting and have a bit more life and vibe about them. And certainly a wah-wah pedal is definitely going to help as well. Let's just see. I'm looking through the chat. In guitar they call it a gliss. Well, a gliss would be much more. That's a glissando. So on this particular occasion, it's a grace note. You're sliding one into the other. It's not really a glissando, okay? All right. DJ says some instruments have an articulation that cannot be replicated on other instruments. Absolutely right. Definitely. You can flutter tongue on a flute. You can flutter tongue on a trumpet. You can flutter tongue on a saxophone, although less easy on a saxophone. And you can flutter tongue on a trombone and a tuba. You can't flutter tongue on a piano. You can't flutter tongue on a guitar. You'd look really stupid if you did. What's flutter tonguing? It's where you move your tongue up and down in your mouth very, very quickly, and it basically disturbs the column of air going into the instrument and makes an interesting buzzing sound. You hear it a lot in 1920s dance band arrangements where they want to get that hot trumpet sound that was, the big thing. Great trumpet players like Bubba Miley would do it. He was Duke Ellington's lead trumpet player for a while, and of course Louis Armstrong was a great exponent of doing that. It's not a growl. There's a difference between a growl and a flutter tongue on a brass instrument or a saxophone, for example. But yes, those are definitely articulations that you can do on those instruments and make them sound great that you can't do on a guitar. But yes, good question. Good point. Good point to make as well. Alrighty, quick swig of tea break. Tony says the Nord has a very sweet sounding piano. It does. There are two pianos on the Nord actually. That is the Steinway Concert Grand that you were listening to earlier, which does sound glorious, especially with the sustain pedal. If I do... Sounds absolutely glorious, but there is also the Yamaha C7 that is also in this keyboard as well, which sounds a little bit more like this. different tone to the piano for sure. To me, the Steinway is rounder, fuller, and has a brighter upper end to it, whereas the Yamaha is maybe a bit more brittle sounding, a little bit more mid-range, not quite so bright up the top, unlike the Steinway. But yeah, they do have fantastic sounds. What is the difference between a grand piano and an upright piano? A piano takes longer to burn. Very, very funny. And in actual fact, in all seriousness, I know you were kind of making a wee joke, but there are different kinds of upright piano, believe it or not. And this is probably gonna make everybody run away when I say this. The most common upright piano is where it's called cross-strung. It's where the bass strings are kind of at an angle, and then the middle and treble upper end strings are overlaid over the top at different angles. So the strings kind of look like they're doing this. And so they are kind of overstrung. And then the other upright piano is what they call the upright grand. And the upright grand, all the strings are going in the same direction. It's like as if you took a grand piano, you took the front leg off that's at the very front of it, and then you went boink and you slammed it into a wall. That's basically what the upright grand is. It's like taking the piano, pushing it against the wall so that the piano basically goes like that up against the wall. And those are less common. They are incredibly expensive because they're really hard to maintain, because access to the soundboard is very, very difficult. Unlike on an upright piano. On an upright piano, if you need to get to the soundboard to repair the soundboard, basically all the strings are in a metal frame, and you can take the keyboard out, you can take the hammers out, and then there's another panel underneath the keyboard that you pop out, and then you can unscrew the frame for the strings, and you can literally lift the frame of the strings out, and there's the soundboard, and you can repair the soundboard, put the strings back in, place them back in place, put the hammer and key bed back together again, and make sure you have to be very, very careful about aligning the hammers properly. But it's perfectly possible. But yeah, so that's the difference. There are several different types of upright piano. There's regular strung and overstrung, and then there's upright grand. And they all sound really different. Stephen says, alternating between two notes on a guitar is called a trill. Yes, it is. And it's also called a trill on a piano as well. And there are different types of trill. There's semitone trill, and then there's whole tones trill. And they're different sounding. And depending upon how often you play trills, they're easier or harder to do. If you play a lot of classical pieces, like post-romantic classical pieces, or even, middle to late classical period pieces like late Mozart piano concertos and beginning Beethoven piano concertos, you're doing a lot of trills because trills were still a thing. The reason why trills developed was because originally on a clavichord or a harpsichord, the duration of the note was really short. It just go bang, and then it's gone. So how do you lengthen that note out to a whole note? Well, you fake it by doing this. And that's how they did it on harpsichords. Lots of trills, lots of turns. What's a turn? A turn is where you play, let's say my target note is a C. So a turn would be playing the note, the target note, the note below, the note itself, the note above, and the note itself. So basically, so a trill in the classical periods, like this is something that actually Mozart invented, was basically going note itself, note below, basically going trill, and then finishing off with a tone. Like that. And yes, you can do those on guitar as well. Segovia guitar concertos or John Williams guitar concertos have a lot of trills and a lot of turns in them as well. And some of them, they're done by hammering, and some of them are actually done by, actual plucking and, two-handed work, which is incredibly difficult. Yamaha C7 cuts through a mix better. It might, because it has more mid-range and it's a little more brittle sounding. So yes, it could cut through a mix better. It's not necessarily a better piano. Of pianos used for concerts, I would say if I'm not going to be playing a Steinway, I would be preferring to play a Bosendorfer. Bosendorfers are big, fat, full-sounding pianos like a Steinway, but they are actually quite a lot louder because the soundboard is made out of different material. DJ Vu says, that's right, the arrangement of the strings is very important in the sound of these two instruments. Correct. Tony says, the Steinway piano is the most harmonious implement for musical intention. It completes what is a beautiful and artistic sound. Yes, I love Steinways. I wish I could afford one. Friend of mine has a Steinway, and whenever I need to record actual piano tracks with, actual ambience of a room, I go and I take my mic set and I grab a bunch of stands and I go over to his house and I record his Steinway. Because that Steinway is a thing of beauty, and I know he paid pretty much somewhere in the region of about £150,000 for that Steinway. DJ Verse says, the issue of appropriate sounds also applies to various plugins emulating individual instruments, some of which do not fully reflect the sound of the originals. Yes, and there is a reason for that. It is incredibly expensive to do any kind of modeling technique that is going to, or sampling technique that is going to completely, fully articulate and package up the entire sound of a Steinway concert grand piano into something like this. It's incredibly expensive because you have to do all the velocity layers, all the articulations for each one of those velocity layers. It takes thousands and thousands of hours and millions of samples recorded and then all loaded up onto all 88 keys. So, and I'm just talking about piano sounds. I'm not talking other instruments which also have other articulations and other sounds to them. And so it depends upon the budget that the manufacturer has as to how good quality it is. Now, there are some exceedingly good sounds out there, sampled sounds that are they've not had a particularly big budget, but they've actually made sounds that are really, really good. Really, really good sounding. They've gone for quality over quantity. And so you might not get the full package of articulations, but the quality of the samples is exemplary. Really, really high quality samples. Maybe you don't get 20 articulations or 20 velocity samples. You might only get 10 or you might only get 15. But there are some great sounding products out there that are not incredibly expensive. But, they often say that if you spend a lot of money, you can buy very high quality things. Neumann U87 microphones are incredibly expensive. They are incredibly good microphones. And then there are sample libraries, orchestral libraries, which Rich Cresswell knows pretty much everything that there is to know about orchestral libraries and orchestral sounds and sampling those. And, if anyone is going to know anything about sampling anything, it's going to be Rich Cresswell. He's the expert amongst us on that. Because that's what he does. But yes, if you have the money to spend on an expensive library, then yeah, you're probably going to get something of incredibly a lot of details, shall we say. Whether that's really good quality detail is going to be another thing. There are some really expensive libraries out there that are not that great, but there are some that are incredibly good. VSL are incredibly good. There are other libraries that are coming up fast, like Berlin, that are really, really great sounding. Tony says, I'll never be able to afford a Steinway piano unless I win the lottery. I have more chance of being hit by lightning than winning that. Yes, I think you have more chance of being struck by lightning in your butt than you do of winning the lottery. But yes, a Steinway is completely out of my budget as well, which is why I have this guy. This is a pretty good model of a Steinway Concert Grand. I've played, as I said, I've played this friend of mine's Steinway Concert Grand. My goodness, it's incredibly beautiful, and this is actually pretty darn close to it, to be honest. So I'm happy with it. Aurora's Boring Alice says, I think Gershwin invented velocity. I'm not so sure about that, but Rhapsody in the Kisser is a good example of velocity and compression, hence the punch. Well, I mean, given the fact that George and Ira Gershwin were writing songs in an era before there was really any compressors or anything like that, and you had to do it all in the orchestration, then yeah, you might be right. Maybe not using the exact word velocity, because I think velocity been as a term has been around for a very long time. Certainly scientists use it in physics a lot. But maybe in general musical parlance, maybe Gershwin was one of the first to really coin the term. I don't know. I can't really substantiate either way on that one. Let's see. Let's see. I'm just going to see if we have anything else. Yes, everything in the Nord is physically modeled. That's a technique that they employ to get the sounds for pretty much everything, including the Hammond organ and the Vox Versifer and all of that. It's all done via physical modeling. Okay, I think we are pretty much at the end of Songwriting Simplified, and we kind of finished off there talking about sampling and stuff, which was a little bit off the beaten trail for songwriting, but I think important nonetheless. But thank you very much, everybody, for your great questions, especially to Bob, who is watching on the replay. Thank you very much, Bob, for your great question. It generated a lot of side questions and some good thoughts. So thank you very much for that. So we'll leave it there. That will be the end of tonight's show. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and for all of you for the 20 likes. And I think we peaked at around about 25 viewers tonight, which is not bad. We can definitely do better. Our record still stands at 38. So we're a wee bit short of our record. It'd be nice if we could hit 38 and then break that 40 barrier and get into, the 40s and 50s regularly for this show. So if you know people who you think Songwriting Simplified would be of great value to them, get them along. Tell them when it is. Share the link. Share the link to the show so that they know when it is, where it is. Get them subscribed to the channel as well. Get yourselves subscribed if you have not subscribed already. Hit that like button if you think the show was good tonight. I appreciate it. And I can see you guys spamming the heart button as well. Thank you very much for that. I'm getting some celebrations going up, which is awesome. I love to see those things going up. So if you like just hitting that button, then do that. I don't know actually what it does in terms of the algorithm, but it's good fun to see it floating up to the top of the chat. That's very cool. But other than that, folks, I'll see you on Sunday for Sunday Night Live, and I'm looking forward very much to taking your Studio One questions and to talk more about Studio One. Please also remember, the last Friday of this month is the UK Studio One meetup. We've got a couple of weeks before we get to that point, but I want to give you the heads up. It would be nice if we get a good turnout for that. So if you've never been to a Studio One meetup before, I implore you, please do come along to the UK one. When is it? Well, for you guys over in the United States, it's a wee bit tricky. I totally get that. It's in the middle of the afternoon for you guys. So currently the time difference is 5 hours, but by the time we get to the end of the month, it'll be back to 6 hours between the UK and the central time zone area of the United States. So it will be 8 p.m. here in the UK. So count back 6 from 8, and that is what time it will be in the central time zone, and then you can work out your own time zone from there. As the further kind of towards the west you go, the longer it is. So yeah, I'd really like to see a lot of people turn out for that. It's going to be pretty good. Make sure you've got yourself a bottle of something to drink as well, wine, beer, whatever it takes your fancy. I will be definitely doing either wine or beer. I haven't decided yet. So until then, folks, I will see you on Sunday at 6 p.m. Central Time for Songwriting Simplified. Until then, folks, I wish you all a very good night. Good night.